Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a first look at an upcoming Tier 8 Soviet premium medium tank, the ST-66. And as you can see here, we've got an image of it in-game and it has an interesting track mechanic. As far as we're aware currently, it doesn't have a specific mechanic, it's just got similar track layout to tanks like the AE Phase 1, having two driving tracks and the same on the other side, which is pretty cool looking. At the minute, no mechanic related to this, but potentially could be something we see, I don't know. But let's have a look at this tank's statistics. So, shell damage, alpha, 300. Average. Unfortunately, 300 is a little bit lacking nowadays. 320, 340 are becoming increasingly prevalent and increasingly better. So 300 does lack. Penetration, 217 millimeters standard APCR is really quite low. However, it is balanced out by 290 millimeters of heat penetration. That's a pretty significant difference in penetration values between standard and gold, kind of meaning this tank is going to be pretty gold heavy, so not a very cheap tank to play. But 290 millimeters heat is pretty nice, but that 270 millimeters of APCR is going to be lacking, especially at tier 8. Reload time of 8.2 seconds with 300 alpha is going to give this tank in the region of about 2,200-ish DPM, so not great, but not the worst for tier 8 mediums. You know, tanks, for example, like the 122 TM are significantly worse, so 2,200 odd is not going to be terrible. Gun handling, 2.1 seconds aim time, bang average, nothing special there. However, 0.37 dispersion is going to be quite poor. And with this tank kind of being low alpha, firing quite a lot of times, having quite poor dispersion is going to be pretty painful. Definitely not going to be great at medium to long range. Definitely going to still be pretty kind of unpredictable, unforgiving at short to medium range. However, 0.37 is not going to be the worst, but it's definitely not going to be the best at the bad end of average, I'd say. 6 degrees of gun depression is passable, very standard for Russian mediums. Mobility, 50 forward, 16 in reverse is pretty nice, pretty comfortable. 50 is pretty average. You're going to be getting to positions quicker than heavies, but lightly armored heavies are going to be not much slower than you, and you are going to be slower than, you know, you are going to be kind of slower than the faster mediums, the more lightly armored mediums. It does have decent power to weight ratios, so it is going to maintain that speed over soft, boggy terrain and up hills, but 50 is not great, but you are going to still be able to take some decently aggressive positions. 1250 hit points is okay, bang average, not particularly anything special there. Quite a few newer tanks, especially tier 8 mediums, have had 1300, so 50 less. Armor, okay, 250 millimeters for a turret is pretty nice. That's definitely okay for tier 8, especially for a medium. And 120 for a hull, once again, is going to be pretty nice, especially for a medium. Unfortunately, this tank isn't on tanks.gg yet, so we can't have a look at its live effective armor. But basing it off similar tanks that are already in the game and the general trend that we have with Soviet medium tanks at tier 8, it's going to have some funky ricochet angles. Its lower plate will be weak, but its upper plate will be able to ricochet low penetration APCR. Its turret will be particularly strong towards the extremities, with likely some weaknesses directly close to the gun, but its gun mantlet will be relatively strong. And as you can see on the image, it does have a cupola, but it is going to be quite small, and it will likely not be particularly weak. However, we'll have to wait to see once we see this tank on tanks.gg. But finally, before we have a look at a comparison, 370 meters view range is pretty poor, gonna struggle to spot for itself, so there would be an argument to run vents on this tank, especially for that poor dispersion, you know, potentially running a vents rammer improved aiming setup with a hardening setup to interchange for more brawling based maps. So let's compare this tank, and it is going to be a little bit of a peculiar comparison as such to the Object 416. The Object 416 recently just got buffed in the update 1.26 in September. It was not the top gun that got buffed, it was the bottom gun that got buffed. However, we're going to compare the 416 to the ST-66 with the 416's top gun. So DPM, the 416 is significantly ahead there, having, I believe, the best tier 8 DPM. Especially with a gun rammer, that is pretty terrifying DPM. But the ST-66, as you can see, is not too far behind. It is, behind by, 300, but 2.2, it's not terrible. The ST having 300 alpha compared to the 416's 320. Okay, as you can see, 320 is kind of the more comfortable standard, but 300 could be worse, right? Dispersion, okay, semi-similar. The ST-66 being worse by 0.02, 0.37 compared to 0.35. So, if any of you have played the 416, you'll know it isn't necessarily reliable at range, but it's okay. The ST-66 will be a little bit worse than that, but it will be okay. If, you don't mind ripping your own hair out shooting tanks at 400 meters, yeah, you'll probably be fine playing the ST. Aim time, the ST is slightly better, 2.1 compared to 2.2. Okay, kind of a minimal difference, but slightly better. That's kind of nice. Speed-wise, mobility, identical forwards, 50-50. However, the ST is going to be slightly slower in reverse, 16 compared to 20 for the 416. Kind of a nominal change, nominal difference, doesn't particularly make a difference. The forward speed is what matters more. Gun depression, -6 for the ST is much better than the -4 for the object, which does definitely struggle with its gun depression. HP, the ST does have slightly more, 1250, better than the object 416's 1200. Okay, you'll be able to trade slightly better, but very, very slightly better at that. View range, 370 meters for the ST is going to be slightly worse than the object 416's 380. Once again, neither tank can particularly spot great for themselves unless you take a spotting setup, which is not, in my opinion, going to be the best choice to take on either tank. And then penetration-wise, standard penetration, identical apart from having 1mm more APCR on the ST. So 217mm APCR compared to 216mm AP. And however, gold penetration, the ST is worse off, 290mm heat compared to 330mm heat for the 416. So as you can kind of tell here from putting these two tanks side by side, you can kind of see what is likely going to be the gameplay style of the ST-66. It's going to kind of play a pseudo snipery mid to long range medium tank role that the 416 tends to play, but it is also going to have the capability to play the more aggressive medium tank role like most other Soviet medium tanks, for example, the T-44-100. It will kind of fall under the similar kind of gameplay style. It will play in similar positions to the T-44-100, but will have more DPM, for example, than the T-44-100, and it's looking like it's going to have the turret armor to be able to play some slightly different positions better than the T-44-100 can, and it's pretty low profile, which is kind of tends to be a little bit of a trend with these rear turreted Soviet mediums, which does allow it to play some funky positions behind bushes, under a ridgeline, and be able to peek out sideways with its gun turned, meaning you expose less of your hull, less of your tank. So it's looking interesting for sure, especially with this double track. Obviously, at the minute, that doesn't actually have any gameplay impact. It's just visual. But I think it looks pretty cool as a tank. It's definitely looking like a loot box tank. However, I will hold my hands up and say Wargaming recently did sell the CS52C, which looked like the definition of a loot box tank, just straight up in the premium store. And potentially this could be a similar kind of situation where this tank does come up for sale for, 40 odd euros, 35 Great British pounds in the premium store, straight up for purchase. And I'd like to see it like that. I feel like this tank is kind of similar in statistics to the CS52C. It definitely has some strong points, but it definitely has its weaknesses. It's definitely not looking overpowered. It's definitely not looking terrible. It's looking like a bang average tier 8 premium tank that will work in some situations, will struggle in other situations. It's definitely, in my opinion, gonna just kind of fall into the middle average kind of range, which unfortunately does also kind of match it up to be sold through loot boxes, but we'll have to wait and see. But do let me know down in the comments what you think about this tank. Do you also think, similar to me, premium store available, or is it going to be a loot box tank? And yeah, if you did like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!